if you could rise for invocation and pledge to the flag. Lord, our Heavenly Father, as we gather here tonight to conduct business for the city of Leesburg and Leesburg Airport, please give us the wisdom to make decisions in the best interest of our citizens. This we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This workshop, they can't do anything anyway.
Good evening, everybody. Tracy Dean, Airport Manager. Thank you all for coming. Tonight is the Master Plan Update Workshop. Over the course of almost the last year, I've been presenting to you and sending to you the working papers that AvCon team has prepared. A lot of them quite lengthy with current existing conditions, forecasts for the future, and alternatives. So tonight, this presentation that will be given to you by Mary, and the rest of the AvCon team is here too. I'll let Mary introduce them so their proper titles are announced as well. But tonight she's going to give you kind of a consolidated view of big picture and possibly also some big budget numbers. But I believe that after this, once we get some direction of how we want to proceed with the growth forecasts and what our outlined plan will be for the next handful of years, one of the next steps will be to fine-tune individual project costs so that we can make better decisions on all of them. So, Mary?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mary Soderstrom. I'm with AvCon, and with me today is Sandeep Singh, president of AvCon, and sitting next to him is Brandon Heyer, who will be taking over a lot of the engineering duties here at Leesburg, and Tim Shea, who's our business development manager. So progressing on to what we have going on today. Next. We've got a short agenda. We've gone through 3 working papers now, 4, and I want to go through just a very quick introduction of the airport planning, master planning process, inventory of existing conditions, aviation activity forecasts, the facility requirements, and the development and evaluation of alternatives. This is a bubble diagram of what the airport planning, master planning process is, and it goes through several processes. It's a little, the reason I put this up here is it's a little different than master planning for your downtown or for a college campus. It's something that's prescribed by the FAA and FDOT. And the reason that they want this done is because a lot of the projects are going to be primarily funded by FAA and FDOT. So they want to make sure that each of the projects that come out of this process are justified. And so, because it's going to be their money, and one of the first things we have to do is evaluate what's on the airport now. And so we did an exhaustive study of looking at everything that's on the airport, from the airport administration, meteorological conditions, which indicate primarily wind conditions, because airplanes operate into the wind when they're landing and taking off. We look at airspace and air traffic control to see what the airspace is around the airport and if there's any obstructions, what other air traffic is going on a regular basis. We looked at the airfield facilities. Those are the runways, taxiways, aprons, things like that. Landside facilities, which is going to be your hangars, T-hangars, airport administration. We looked at the utilities, whether or not they were up to speed to be able to accommodate everything that we might want to do in the future. We also looked at the demographics of Leesburg and Lake County, primarily to see what the economic income is going to be projected out over the next 20 years, what the unemployment rate is, things like that. And then we looked at land use and zoning, and this is something that is takes into account a lot what the state is requiring that we have to look at, such as how far away garbage dumps are from the airport, because garbage dumps attract birds, and birds are not good when they conflict with aircraft. Next. So the next step is to do forecasts, and we do that for the number of based aircraft. When those are the aircraft that are at the airport day to day, year in, year out, they actually are housed at the airport. They're not just flying in for the day or flying in for 6 months. They're actually housed at the airport. We also look at annual operations. An operation is a takeoff and a landing. So if you've got one flight, that's 2 operations. And then we're also looking at what kind of aircraft are going to be coming in and out of the airport in the next 20 years. Right now, you've got a lot of jets. You've got a large number of single-engine aircraft. We project that this is a very unique airport in the fact that we've got a lot of helicopters. We looked at what that projection is going to be moving forward in the next 20 years. One of the things about the aviation forecasts is that both the FAA and the FDOT must approve not only the forecast, but how you do it. There are certain methodologies that they've approved and that they want you to follow. So we've done that, and before we move forward, the forecasts have to be approved by FAA and FDOT. And that has occurred. Next. Oh, excuse me. We actually did the forecasts. We developed 10 forecasts that were for based aircraft. Next. And this is the preferred based aircraft forecast, which basically shows that we're going from the 85 that were in 2016 up to about 127 in the next 20 years. Next. And let me go back to the last one again. You're going to see a spike there at a certain point, and some of that has to do with the depression that happened in 2008. It had nothing to do with the airport by itself. It's that every airport in the state pretty much had a problem after about 2008, and we're starting to get back out of that. Next. We also did 9 forecasts of annual operations. And again, if you look at that spike there, that's when the air traffic control tower came in. And one of the things that the air traffic control tower does is it actually counts every operation that comes in and goes out of the airport. Before that, it was kind of a guesstimate. And so what you always see is that when an air traffic control tower comes onto an airfield, the number of operations goes down because everybody's very euphoric about the number of operations, and they kind of overestimate them. And then what happened right after that was the recession in 2008. So that's why you've got that tremendous dip going on in that graph. Next. So where we are today is we've got about 63,000, 64,000 annual operations that occur at the airport on an annual basis. And we're predicting that that's going to grow to about 80,000, 81,000 annual operations within the next 20 years. That is an average annual growth rate of about 1.2%, which is not bad. Next. We looked at the fleet mix, and you can't see it too much from this graph, unfortunately, but the single-engine aircraft operations are actually predicted to decline over the entire United States over the next 20 years. So while it's not going to grow as fast, it's probably still going to be the largest number of aircraft that are going to be at the airport. But the single-engine aircraft operations are going to decrease as well, and they're actually going to go from about 9,000 operations down to about 8,000. Jet operations will increase. We see more jets coming in here, we really do. Rotorcraft, which is another word for helicopters, are going to increase substantially over the next several years based on primarily Brainerd helicopters. The other operations are everything from sport aircraft to gliders to, it's a mix mash of everything that doesn't quite go into the other groups. But those are also expected to increase. So overall, we expect that the total operations fleet mix will increase over the next 20 years. Next. The FAA approved the forecasts on 19 April 2017. Excuse me, FDOT approved the forecasts in April of 2017. The FAA approved the forecasts in May of 2017. Next. So then we got into facility requirements. And what facility requirements are is you've got what you've got on the airport, and you've got the forecasts of what your aircraft are going to be, what your operations are going to be. What are you going to need in order to meet that expectation that you don't already have? And that's what the facilities forecast does, is it tells you what the difference is between what you've got and what you're probably going to need 20 years from now. Next. So one of the things we look at is, when we're doing the facility requirements, is, in case you didn't know, runways always have two numbers on each end, and it's the compass direction that a pilot is facing as they're landing. So the current airport has the primary runway at 1331, and the secondary runway at 321. What we've actually figured out is that those runway designations need to be changed because the magnetic declination, that's basically how the compass points at the magnetic North Pole, changes over time. And it's been changing across the state of Florida for the last 5 years or so. So we're about the next time you start working on those runways, you're going to need to change the designations on the ends of the runways. FDOT and FAA don't really recommend that you go through the process of just changing those numbers by themselves. They actually ask you to wait until you've got a project where it can be kind of packaged in with the rest of the project. Next, thank you. We also did a runway length analysis for both runways and found that there's no justification at this time, based on the aircraft that are currently landing and the aircraft that are projected to land, that there's no reason to lengthen either runway at this time. FDOT about every 3 years comes around to each airport in the state on a rotating basis and does a significant amount of study on the condition of the pavements of every airport. And what you see on this graphic right here is the one that they did for 2015. And that shows that the green are those pavements that are in pretty good condition. Yellow is kind of, they're declining. If you get down to red or pink, that means you've got some trouble areas there and they need to be looked at fairly quickly. Based aircraft storage. So we currently have 50 T hangars, about 40 conventional hangar positions, based aircraft tie-down positions of about 16, for a total of about 106 positions for just the based aircraft. That's not taking into account the itinerant aircraft that kind of come in on a day basis or a month or so. So what you'll see here is that over on the far right-hand column is that we're probably going to need another 22 T hangars within the next 20 years, 18 conventional hangar positions. And those are the conventional hangars are the big boxy type looking hangars, and those can the box hangars can typically house anywhere from 1 to 5 aircraft, depending on the size of the aircraft and what the lessee of that hangar wants to do with that hangar. They may not want to even park aircraft in there at all. They may be running a business out of that hangar. And then the based aircraft tie-down positions. The tie-down position is either out on the ramp or in a grassy area where you can store your aircraft outside, and you can tie it down to rings that are either in the ground or on the pavement. And some pilots prefer to do that way. So we're going to need about 47 positions. That's okay. It's okay. We also looked at environmental considerations on the airport. We looked at the protected and endangered species that are on the airport, and that included the gopher tortoise. Every airport in the state of Florida, I swear, has got a gopher tortoise on it. And eastern indigo snakes live in, they're also an endangered species, they live in the burrows of the gopher tortoise. So where you've got one, you've got the other. You do have a bald eagle nest location on or about the airport. There's a black bear have been sighted going across the airport. We don't think they're actually living on the airport, and it's more back behind where Lowe's is. And then there's also been a significant population of boar. Next.
No, those aren't protected.
They're not protected, but they're a nuisance.
Okay.
They don't deal well with aircraft.
They don't deal
Said
with
they were
anything.
protected.
I'm sorry?
They don't deal well with anybody.
Yeah. State protected species include of plants include the ones that you see here. I've tried to include a few pictures, so if you ever do see one, you don't step on it. Next. The other thing that I think this airport's very well known for is the number of wetlands that you have on this airport. And it significantly will impact what you do with any development on the airport. Everything in green or blue is, well, I shouldn't say blue, but everything in green is a wetland. The blue is the line of the airport property. And actually, that's a little bit of an old slide because you've now sold some property to the car dealership on 441. Next. And this is a floodplains map, which shows that, you know, when you get a good flood going, these are the areas on the airport and around the airport that can flood. So you don't have much land on which to build as you move forward. Next. We've also done a sustainability and management plan, as well as an airport recycling, reuse, and waste reduction plan. Both of these plans are mandated by the FAA in order to receive funding for this project. And they are appended as appendices to the master plan. Next. So as we go forward through the alternatives, all of the alternatives have a couple of things in common. They correct some of the pavement issues that are on the airport at this time, including the rerouting of taxiway A, which currently has a kink in it, and so we'll straighten that out, and that will also provide more apron space in front of some of the hangars that front onto the primary runway. It will also include a new 65-foot by 13-foot hangar, excuse me, I think that's incorrect, 13-foot hangar to be built by Sun Air, a new west apron on the other side of Sun Air, helicopter parking as well as a helipad, relocated fuel farm on the west apron. Next. This is the first development alternative we did, and these three that I'm showing you are composites of a lot of different area developments that we did, but we kind of broke it down into three developments just to keep it simple. This one is trying to avoid really significant wetlands if we can. There's various grades of wetlands, and we go into great detail, probably too much in the report, on the different types of wetlands. And so we're trying to reduce the amount of wetlands impact as we possibly can. This one also will have 43 additional new hangars, T-hangars, 18 new conventional hangars, 51 small box hangars, and then up what you see on the north side of 441, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to do a pointer on this screen back here, and I apologize to the commissioners. But this would be actually commercial development on the other side of 441. This would also be maybe some light industrial. And then this parcel is the parcel I just mentioned a few minutes later. This is parcel that has just recently been sold to the car dealership on 441. But what we're also showing on this one are continuation of T-hangars on the airport, box hangars down behind Lowe's, some conventional hangars along the runway 321, and then conventional hangars on the west side of the primary runway. In order to build these, you're going to have to build a road in from 441, and I think that's going to be a substantial cost, primarily because of the wetlands. And I don't think that I'm pretty sure that no person coming in wanting to build a hangar is going to want to front the cost of that road prior to the development of the hangar. If you're going to get development on the west side of the airport, the city is probably going to have to fund. Hopefully they can get some participation from FDOT, but that's no guarantee at this point, for the participation of putting that road in there, opening it up, putting utilities in there. Next, please.
Can you explain what
Sure.
the kind of tan or cream color is on here? What
This
is it?
here?
No, in front of the hangars and.
Oh, that's new apron work.
New apron work. Okay.
Yeah, I'm
thank you.
sorry, I should have. The red are new buildings, the
Yeah.
cream is new apron work. I mentioned before that we would straighten out the kink in taxiway A. Taxiway A goes right now along the front of the hangars, some of the hangars. It has an S curve right here, which not all pilots can see from their aircraft, particularly as you get into larger and larger aircraft. It's going to become less likely that they're going to be able to see that kink in the taxiway. The smaller ones, because it depends on the aircraft as well, but they'll have a harder time seeing to get through that S curve. And so what we're proposing is that you straighten out that taxiway, which will also allow you to fill in pieces here that will give you more ramp space to that taxiway. We also are reworking a couple of things that make the airfield up to standard for FAA modifications. They've just, about 5 years ago, changed a lot of the strategy on the way that taxiways approach aprons and things like that. We're fixing those kind of things. And that's what the cream is on this slide.
And when you refer to a small box hangar, what
Small
size?
box hangar would be a box-type hangar that would house a single aircraft.
Okay.
The T hangars also house single aircraft, but they have a distinct shape to them that looks like a T, and then they can be nested together like that. The box hangars you can fit into different areas that you may or may not be able to fit T hangars into. We would have to look more closely at these box hangars to see if T hangars could be put in there.
So I can just view that as equivalent to a T hangar in terms of usage?
In terms of usage, yes. It's also probably better equipped to put a small business into a box hangar than into a T hangar. It's not unheard of to put a small business into a T hangar, but it's certainly a better accommodation for a small business to put it into a box hangar. We haven't gone into the engineering on any of these projects, so we know generally that we know what the gradients are in the area to a general degree, but we haven't gone into specifics on any of these projects. So as we get closer to those, we'd be able to better analyze what will fit where. But we know that the box hangar will, in general, fit in those areas, and the T hangars up here will generally fit into here. Next. This is just going over some of the specifics. These are the T hangars that were up on the hill. These are the hangars on the west side, and this is showing the commercial area on the north side of 441. Next.
If you can go back to that other slide, this lower corner here,
Yeah.
you have that growth.
This road?
Yeah, the box, the dog park, dog TV. where you put
Yeah,
in
the dog
growth.
park's right there.
Yeah, that growth that you have along Silver Lake Drive,
Mhm.
that's not going to be permitted.
Okay.
Our development line is going to be right about maybe a little bit past the edge of the line that we did for the Jenkins sale. Kind of following
Okay,
that
so you're not
arc.
going to be able to go much further north than that?
If it is, it's going to have to be residential.
Well, and the
So I think it's
FDOT,
150 feet off of Silver Lake Drive is all zoned residential.
okay,
So any
Well-
commercial or industrial property is going to have to be south of that.
okay, and the FDOT will not fund anything they will not fund anything on the airport. the airport, if you've got that, if you try to put residential along here, because it's too close to your runways.
Yep.
And that will cause a noise problem, et cetera, et cetera. So,
So we
Thank you.
can get maybe the first 2 red buildings in there, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's an important point, because when
Right.
you come back to some of the other alternatives for developing that area, that's why I brought that up.
okay. I will look at the zoning on that and modify
Yeah,
it.
you double check. I know on this west side,
Mm-hmm.
in this area,
This area here?
I know, now this is a county zoning in here,
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure that's all residential.
That's currently
And then
residential.
I'm pretty sure we do this, we copy this in here.
Okay.
And that's, that was a Silver Lake community.
Yeah, the FDOT's basically what was residential there, because I've looked at those houses, they've been there since before '83. Anything after '83, the FDOT, actually the state, it's state law, is not going to allow you to put residential in that area that close to the runway. Next. I'm going to back up here for a second before I get into this development. One of the things that I haven't pointed out to you is this yellow line here. And that yellow line is the outline of an easement between the city of Leesburg and the St. John's Water Management District. It's a perpetual easement that allows the St. John's Water Management District to flood that area at any time in order to manage the waters between the conservation area, Lake Harris, and anything else that's going on within their domain. To my knowledge, and I've talked to a couple people, they have not done this since the easement was signed in 2008, but they do have the right. And that's one of the reasons that I put this yellow line on each of the alternatives, is to show why we have not showing development in that area. Not only is it a flood zone, not only is it wetland, but it's also something that the St. John's Water Management District has the right to flood. So getting into alternative 2, we're showing pretty much the same kind of commercial development up here. When we were developing alternatives for each piece of parcel, there were a lot of different alternatives that we developed, and there are still some things that can be changed on that. Basically, what this is saying is that we'd like to put commercial development over here. We think that because you've got the Sumter College over here, we think that would be a good thing to kind of feed off that, as well as off of 441. We're again showing the box hangers over here because this area, that's one of the few things we can really fit in and around some of that, the wetland that comes down here. We're showing a little bit different because there's a piece of wetland that's less onerous. It's still onerous, but it's less onerous than this piece. We're showing maybe it growing back in here to utilize that to the fullest. One of the things that we were thinking of when we were developing this alternative was still respect the wetlands, but maybe take it in, maybe take a little bit bigger footprint into the wetlands, realizing that it probably is going to cost you some money to go into those wetlands, but it's an alternative. The other thing that this one does is it shows a taxiway going down to your new seaplane base, seaplane ramp. It shows a taxiway going down there, as well as something coming over from this development where they could use this taxiway system and come back down here. That could potentially allow them to stay off of this area, off of your active runway areas as long as possible before they get out to the area. One of the other reasons that we were thinking about putting box hangars down here is that seaplanes will traditionally go into box hangars, and some of the amphibious ones actually need a higher box hanger because of the floats that are on them. There are certain types that need that, and that might be something that you want to consider to accommodate different types of seaplanes. A lot of the I probably, and I know who's in the audience here, a lot of them can be with floats or without floats. Then there's amphibious, but there's a lot of them that are very high base and would probably need a higher hangar if they were going to be stored in a hangar. Typically, seaplanes aren't typical, but they aren't often hangared because the people who fly seaplanes like to have them in the water as much as possible. We're showing the same development of hangars over here because frankly, about all you can fit over in this area are these types of hangars. That's not to say that we're going to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 hangars at 100 by 200 feet. It's just to show they're going to have to be in a long line, whether or not one's 100 by 100 or another one's larger or smaller. It's just to show that the footprint of what these hangars could possibly be. And we actually are thinking that it's because of the money that's going to need to be spent on the road to get over to this west area, you're going to need to put some pretty substantial hangars over there to lease them out. You or someone that comes in to build the hangar for themselves, and then they lease the property, the land. It's going to need to be a substantial rent or a substantial building to be able to recoup some of the money that would be needed to build this roadway system. On this development, we're also showing an additional box hanger, conventional hangars over here with an apron, some box hangers here, box hangers here. On all of them, we're showing an enhancement to the apron entrance over here on this side of the airport, on the west side of the airport, because as you know, this is the more well-advertised entrance. And then when somebody's trying to get over to the FBO or trying to get over to the admin building, they have to go through a series of gates that may or may not be as easy as you'd think. So we're trying to, and the airport's trying to get people to kind of come in this way, come down and see the admin building and the FBO and some of the other things that are over here. This is the west apron that I was talking about earlier, and we're showing, just as an example, 3 helicopter parking spaces where they can hover in and hover out. They don't need to be towed in and out. We've also showed here a public helipad on the taxiway that would be under the control of the air traffic control tower as it's landing and taking off. This particular, we also are showing on almost all of them a commercial development over in this area, as well as this particular building here would also be commercial development. This would be new hangars, and we're also talking about putting the fueling station here as opposed to where it currently stands. We think it would be serving a lot more people here. The one that's here was put here when the FBO was in that location. When the FBO moved down here, and they're the ones that are dispensing a lot of the fuel for the itinerant aircraft, it makes it a little bit less efficient for the FBO, let's put it that way. Next. So this alternative, as I mentioned before, concentrates more fully on providing conventional hangars. It doesn't respect quite as much the wetlands, so you can have 73 acres of wetland impact on this one. It does have 98,000 square feet of commercial space, and it does not add any new T hangars, which is something I know that the city has looked at, and 32 new conventional hangars as we have drawn them. That doesn't mean that they can't be more or less number. Next. And alternative number 3 is, I know, a controversial alternative, and I'll tell you why I put it in here and some of the thoughts behind it. This alternative is based on closing one of the runways. It would be to close this runway. Runway 321 is your secondary runway. It's not needed currently to meet the wind specifications that are put out by FAA. It's a good runway. It serves the tenants that are facing it very well. We just thought that this needed to be an alternative for you to think about. because you are surrounded by wetlands and flood zones and everything else like that, and you've got a runway that isn't technically required. Yes, it's a nicety, but it's not technically required. If you don't want to get into a lot of wetland impacts, this might be an alternative. One of the several things that it does for you is it opens up this entire area on the north side of 441. And you would have the choice of either selling that off or developing it yourselves, and I would recommend commercial development over there just because of the location it's on. We would also have the opportunity to put more commercial development over on the south side of 441. We could put conventional hangars here that could then come in and out this way on your taxiway B. Conventional hangars here. This would be very conventional hangar heavy. We would still have your T hangars up here on the hill, but it would also be very conventional hangar heavy. We would still continue to have conventional hangars over here. And then finally, what this one would do is it would open up this whole area down here to the south that you've not previously been able to get to. So I know that this is a very controversial alternative. I'm planting a seed. I don't expect you to select this one this time around. I think that the next 5, 10, 15 years, as you get into needing more and more space for hangars in order to continue to grow, and you start looking at the wetland impacts, because I know that you all just had to pay wetland impacts in order to do the seaplane base. Those wetland impacts are not going to go, they're not going to get less expensive. They're only going to get more expensive. And at some point in time, I think you're going to need to consider it very strongly. I don't think the airport's there yet, but I just wanted to plant the seed that it's a possibility. There may be other ways of doing it. I'm just saying this is one way of approaching the problem. So this one, alternative 3 would have, next please, would have 43 additional T hangars, 33 new conventional hangars, 51 small box hangars. You would have 266,000 square feet of commercial space. And that's either stuff that you could sell or that you could actually operate yourself, which would then make the airport more sustainable, because you're creating your own revenue that you can use to match the grants from the FAA and the FDOT. This one also has a very small impact to wetlands, and it's 25 acres. I realize that 25 acres is nothing, but considering all the alternatives we've shown tonight, this one probably has the smallest. It doesn't have the smallest, it's the second smallest. Nope, it is the smallest, excuse me. Yes, it is the smallest impact. Next slide. So what we're recommending is alternative 1. We think that's the most conservative and conventional alternative. It meets the requirements of the facility requirements in providing the number of T hangars that you're going to need for the next 20 years, box hangars, conventional hangars. It will fix a lot of the airfield pavement issues that are going on right now. This is also what you see here. This is not a 20-year plan. This is probably a 50-year plan, because we're more than meeting the criteria for the facility requirements. But I also wanted to show what you could do if you take into consideration all the constraints that you've got on the airport. And you do have a lot of them, between the flood zones, the wetlands, the easement that you've got. There's a lot of things that are constraining it, but you've got a lot of possibilities as well. But this is actually the alternative that we prefer. This is the one that, as I said, is alternative number 1. And with that, next. And this is some specifics on that. And next, I thank you for listening to me. I hope I haven't bored you silly, and I'm here to answer questions or just listen as you talk about things amongst yourselves.
The recommendation to move the fuel, is that also included in your recommended?
Yes. Yes.
So I guess, so say we were to adopt this, and then next year we decided we want to do something different. How's that work?
It depends on how different.
Say you've got T-hangers on the highway here,
Right.
right? Say we say, we want to put something commercial there, where the T-hangers are. What do I have to do?
I know that there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not to have build any new T-hangers at all. One of the things that is very important to the vibrancy of an airport.
No, I'm not
Okay.
looking for,
Okay.
I'm asking for technically, it doesn't matter if it's this or something else.
Technically, you
just
can
what
move
would
it.
be. Okay.
The thing that would hold you back is that it has to be shown on what's called the airport layout plan. And that's an engineering type document that shows all the safety areas and things like that. If you decide, and we would, given your okay, we would put this onto the airport layout plan. If you decide you want to move something, you can. It's your airport. Let me say, I've talked a lot about the FAA and FDOT. There are certain things that they require, but in the long run, it's your airport, and you can do what you want to with it within certain parameters. And you can move those T-hangers somewhere else. You can just decide not to. You might get a little pushback on that. But all you would have to do is change the ALP. And that would require having somebody come in and draft it new again.
Mhm. Okay.
And the other thing that I probably should mention is that master plans are typically done on a 5 to 8 year rotation. So you'll be going through this process again, or something very similar to it, within the next 5 to 8 years. So you can always change your mind then based on the things that have changed. FAA, FDOT typically require that a master plan be done when the administration of the airport and the city have changed, and the philosophy of the airport and the city have changed. When all the things that were on the capital improvement program for the airport have either been recognized, fulfilled, and built, or when it's decided that it's no longer relevant, and you do that in consultation with the FAA and FDOT. Part of what the master plan process is determining between the city and FDOT and the FAA what's relevant, what's justified, what you want to be when you grow up, what you want this airport to be when it grows up. And yeah, you can change your mind. You just have to change the drawings. And you will also be asked for some justification for it. And what the master plan is the justification for the airport layout plan.
Is there anything that we looked at the estimated cost to build any of these 3 plans? What estimated gross and net revenues would be?
I did not look at gross revenue. We don't generally, because that's going to depend upon who your tenant is and what kind of arrangements you make with that tenant, and things that are outside of what we can possibly predict. We could do probably it's not in our current scope, but what would be possible is to figure out what the market value is per square foot of hangar, and kind of look at it that way. But that's not within the current scope of this project.
Because that would be, I think, important to know what, even which plan we would, if we went with any one of these plans, is what we would expect in expenses and revenue and demand, whether the demand is there to do those things too. And then I'll just mention it one time, I've said it before, is there just no hope at all that that our airport can become some sort of a Orlando, Leesburg, airport to handle small flights? I know I've had some people in the, I'm not a airplane person
Okay.
in this, but I have had people mention to me that they think that Leesburg Airport is in a prime location to be a, I don't know, a carryover for the, kind of like Sanford.
A reliever
A
airport.
reliever airport. And I know at that point in time in dealing with some of the pilots, and I think Al did follow up on this a little bit, that like Silver Airways, they, at that point in time, they were using the SAW 340s. And I think that our runways meet the specifications. I think the equipment and everything meets requirements for that type of a plane. It's a 34-seater plane, I think. Just looking, I think they're switching over now to some ATR 600s, which are a little bigger planes. So I don't know if they would meet if they would meet that specification. But and then one comparison was made was that, and I'm just relaying information I received because I don't know this business.
I understand.
But another generalization I was given was to take Los Angeles Airport, for example, and to then look at the overlay of the surrounding airports that become the reliever airports for the Los Angeles Airport, and that if you take the Orlando Airport and you do the same thing with that as the Orlando Airport becomes farther and farther away for us, not mileage-wise, but time-wise, with the traffic, it becomes more and more important to have these reliever airports. And if you take that overlay from the Los Angeles Airport and you put it on Orlando, Leesburg becomes one of those locations for a reliever source. And is that just too big of an idea? Is it not a possibility at all?
It's not impossible. It's probably improbable. There are a couple of airports over on the East Coast that are trying to do something very similar. And I'm not going to name names because then we'll get into a contest about it. But they've been trying for years to get commercial service into those airports, and they have a lot of what they call charter aircraft, which are the smaller Silver Airways, Saabs, things like that. There are different requirements for what we call a Part 139, which would be a commercial service airport. You would have to have, you've got the fire station on the property now. It would need to have the people at the fire station trained to accommodate aircraft fires, which is a different type of firefighting than a structures fire. There are several other things that I think that one of your former airport managers was trying to go towards. Leesburg is not there yet. I don't know that it ever will be. And one of the reasons is because of the air traffic control in the area. Believe it or not, a lot of the air traffic control that's going into Orlando is actually being routed out over this area. If you try to get the same thing happening at Leesburg, that traffic is going to interfere with the Orlando traffic. And FAA air traffic control is not going to allow that to happen. They have already put restrictions on Orlando Sanford. There are some things that Orlando Sanford wanted to do, and they're not allowed to do it because Orlando is the big giant that everything is revolving around up there in the air. I think it could happen. It's not going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's very improbable that it will ever happen.
So I don't know the other cities and what they have that we don't have, but probably one thing they don't have that we do have is 200,000 senior citizens in the villages, at our back door, and that are right there. Plus everything else, all the other developments that are in the area.
And that development has gotten you a lot so far. It's gotten you your air traffic control tower. It's gotten you your customs office there at the airport, which is why you're allowed to say that you're an international airport. And the villages will continue. They're not going away. They are a major tenant on the airport, and they will continue to be a major tenant on the airport. But they're serving a niche market at this point in time. I can't say definitively how many based aircraft here at this airport are owned and operated by residents of the villages or top of the world, but I know it's a fairly small percentage.
And I'm mentioning that more from, the potential demand of, 200,000 senior citizens plus the other surrounding residents that we have outside of the villages for, to be able to have these smaller commuter flights to go from, here to Fort Lauderdale or Atlanta or, even, wherever those places may be, Fort Myers
Right.
or Miami, that kind of thing. So, and again, I don't know the dynamics of it, but it has been pointed out to me, and I've heard, and I talked to several who said, "Nah, no way, never can happen." But then I have other people that say, "Man, this is quite a possibility for Leesburg." It's, not 5 years or 10 years down
Right.
the road, but if you start looking 25, 30 years down the road of the increased aircraft flights in and out of Orlando and surrounding areas, that and the growth here, that there's that potential. So.
And I know that Orlando, when they're doing their master planning, they look at where the people that are going into Orlando, coming to Orlando to fly in and out, they look at where those people are coming from. And right now, and I was part of the last master plan, and so I didn't do this part of it, but I did read that section. Right now, the villages, well, this was done about 2-3 years ago. Right now, the villages is not a significant draw. They're actually getting more from the East Coast of Florida. At this time, that's not going to say it's going to
You're
change.
saying Orlando's getting more of a draw from East Coast versus
Yeah,
Yeah, because the villagers
Right.
they stay here until they go back home.
yeah.
they drive.
And the villages, as a corporation, has their operation here, and they fly a lot of their citizens in and out as part of some of their clubs, but it's not a significant draw.
If I can just kind of
Sure.
dovetail to this and then kind of go controversial, because I think it's something that you really have to talk about, and I don't think we can ignore it. You brought up that regional airport thing, I don't know, a year or
Some
so
time
ago.
yeah.
We looked into it a little bit, and Mary brought up some of the points. The other point, the fire department. The other things that you didn't bring up, security, increased security and new perimeter fencing, increased being
TSA.
able to TSA issues, also being able to handle baggage, and then new facilities for that public in and out. So we're not just talking about millions of dollars of improvements, but you're talking about multi-millions of dollars of improvements. Like, my guess, just stabbing at it, would be upwards of $50 to $100 million of improvements. And then you're still at the whims of whatever the commercial market's going to do. So, you might be there, we might be able to bring in Skybolt or, somebody, they might be there a couple of months, oh, this is great, and then when they're not making the revenue and they're not picking up enough passengers, you just dumped $100 million into your airport for nothing. But let's not walk away from that, because I think regionally, the thing that at least I've advised the city commission, and I know I've had a little bit of conversation with the airport advisory board about this, is I recommend that this community look at the airport to be more of an economic development hub for us. I think it has a transportation purpose. And I think if you go through all these elements that have been brought up to you, their discrepancy is, the recommended version is let's be transportation centric. Okay, that's fair. But alternate 3 is, let's be economically centric. So while alternate 1 is probably the most realistic, being transportation centric, investing in hangars and these type of things, developing in those areas is actually the most expensive. You got to develop on the south side, floodplain issues. You got to develop on this east side, flood issues, wetland issues, mitigation issues to get in hangars. And then the big thing, your statistic was only 22 hangars or 22 aircraft needed in the next, 10 years or
That's
something
20
like
years.
that. Okay? Alternate 3 does everything.
This alternate 3 that was
Yes.
right.
Alternate 3 does everything. And remember, this is a master plan, so you don't ultimately have to do this. But which your question is. But alternate 3 sets you up to do everything. Alternate 3 sets you up to have industrial development, T-hangar development in areas that you don't have to put a lot of infrastructure costs in to get to, which could bring down your costs. Not only does it do that, but it opens up a prime area for development. And the biggest issue that we have with opening up for that development is 2 things. One, the citizens that are going to complain when you move the dog park, okay? And
Dog park's
2,
still there.
Oh, there you go. So you can still keep the dog park in there. Well, there you go. So you don't even have that issue. But then the other issue that you may have is the unincorporated influence around Silver Lake. So even if you eliminate that north part of the development area and keep the dog park, you still have prime commercial and industrial place. And we know from the area that we sold to Jenkins, we sold that for about $2.2 million for 5 acres. So we know that property is valuable. So I don't know, there's maybe 10 acres left up in there?
A little bit more than that.
Maybe 15? So you're looking at, what's the math on that? Another 10, 15?
Well,
Is that $30 million?
And that's the reason I was.
That's right?
Yeah, and-
Is that $30 million of potential monies that then, now mind you, that's airport money, okay, that's not general fund money, that's airport money, but then what does that do? That then allows you to come back, leverage, get grants, it's in your ALP, you can start doing these other things, and now that's pie in the sky, so that doesn't mean if you pick alternate 3, it doesn't mean we're gonna close down that runway tomorrow. But it's, you know, so it still provides areas where you can develop. You can still do some of these smaller incremental movements, and you can set the airport up to have major investment later on.
And that's the reason I was asking, because as I look at the 3 proposals, and if you're not going to go in a direction to go bigger, you know, or go to the commercial travel direction here that I was talking about, then and you look at the demand that's there, then this, to me, becomes a more long-term, you know, concept that I would, you know, initially I would say I like this better, but if you go say, and I know we're not going to go out and start building all this stuff for years and years and years, it's like
This is probably a 50-year plan.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're saying we're going to go this direction, which means, okay, well, we're not going to ever talk about this other, you know, commercial thing again. But I kind of like that. You know, if we're not going to go commercial route, I like this kind of a plan, I think, better myself, you know, initially here. So.
And so I got the same speech about the commercial probably from the same person, I'm guessing, based on the things you said. And the reason, and so I looked into it, and the reason it doesn't work is they picked LA, which is the second biggest metro, is almost 6 times bigger than Orlando. And Los Angeles is unique in that it's on an ocean, so you can't go 4 ways around it like you can in Orlando. But when you look at the metros like Orlando, they're St. Louis, Charlotte, San Antonio, and Portland. They don't have that,
work that way.
same, you know, feeder pattern around it because they're just not nearly the massive size and concentrated size that.
And
Los
if you
Angeles
look,
has.
if you look at Los Angeles, their feeder airports are substantially further away than Leesburg is to Orlando.
But
I mean, and I don't know if you know, just too, when you watch the traffic here, you know, up here you can sit, I sit in my office all the time, and you can see the planes, and at night it's great because you can see them stack up. I mean, that's everybody coming in to use the western north-south runway at Orlando. Like, this is their base leg, boom,
Yeah.
and they turn and land south.
Jeff Carlino just put up a picture yesterday, I think, of flying over his house, going to Orlando. So.
This recommended alternative from AvCon, is this a combination of 1, 2, and 3, or is this one
It's a
particular?
combination of alternative 1
Okay.
with some minor modifications that, based on talking to the airport and a couple of the tenants. It's the most conservative. It tries to stay out of wetlands as much as possible. It primarily tries to meet the requirements of the facility requirements without getting you into trouble in the future. And you could start off with the preferred alternative, and 5, 10 years from now, still go back and go to the third alternative.
Okay.
It's not negating the third alternative.
because I'm not ready to go to alternative 3 yet, but I think after looking at it and your explanation of what it requires to change it, I'm more inclined to adopt it because I can do everything on your recommended alternative if I adopt 3. But then if we decide later we actually want to do this, we don't have to pay you again to redo the master plan.
You'll have to repay somebody in the next 5 to 8 years. I don't know that you're planning on closing your runway in the next 3 to 8 years.
No,
So
probably not, but it just seems like it has all the same stuff.
it's very similar in a lot of ways.
So I guess to tell us, is your recommendation is that why that as opposed to alternative 3? Why would we go on?
To be bluntly honest about it, I didn't think that the tenants at the airport would be jumping up and down for joy for alternative 3. So it's a conservative approach.
Okay, fair enough.
And I don't know, I mean, I've heard what the tenants would have to say either, but if you look at this from a master concept, that even if it's 30, 40 years down the road that this would come to fruition, it's at least something that you say, well, here's our, as you're marketing the city, and people, and you have developers or commercial people that want to come into town, you do have a master concept plan that says this is what we want to do there. So if somebody does come along into Leesburg and says, hey, we need some commercial property, and this is an ideal site, 10 years from now, then maybe you accelerate doing something, but you've got the plan in place. If you go with plan number 1, then you don't have that paper that concept to market to people out there, and so that I'm more inclined to look at the bigger concept there.
What's the expansion possibilities of 3113? Can we make that longer? Is 441 in the way?
It's currently not justified. You'd have to get heavier, faster aircraft in here on a substantial basis, meaning over 500. You'd have to have over 500 operations of a particular group. That would be, and one of the problems you have with your current runway is just the strength of it. Right now, it will only take a 12,500 pound aircraft on a sustained basis. It can
That's
take
the landing weight?
Yeah, it can take. That's the landing weight. It can take aircraft heavier than that now on an occasional basis. But if you take heavier aircraft on that runway than it's designed for, it's not going to stand up to it for as long as it should.
So if we were going that direction, are we talking like the airport would have to close down or beef up the runway?
It doesn't necessarily have to close down. There's a lot of different engineering methods that you maybe only you work at night, and that has a cost attached to it. There's different ways of attacking it, and I'm not going to get into the engineering part of that right now. That is when you start redoing that runway, that's a lot of options that you'd have to explore with the engineer at that time.
Yeah. So, but I'm walking away from your conversation with, if you ever extend that, you're going to have to fix the base too.
I think you're going to have to
You
fix
gotta
the base
stiffen it
before
up.
you extend it. I think the next time you rehabilitate that runway, you need to talk to FAA and FDOT about strengthening that.
You think that's a need now?
I think I have to go back. I don't know where it comes in, but I think that you're on the cusp of it if you aren't actually there. I have to go back and look at the justification
I
on
shouldn't
that.
have asked that. I wish I didn't know that.
A 12,500 pound aircraft is a very small aircraft.
How much do the Falcons that the villages weigh?
I don't have that on the tip of my tongue, but I think it's substantially
Do you know what
higher.
they are?
About 41,000.
So it can do it occasionally,
Mhm.
but not 500 operations a year. You shouldn't be doing it. And you're getting more and more aircraft like that in here. I mean, I see substantial iron on that apron every time I'm here.
Do you guys have input?
I've talked to a lot of the tenants at the airport, and Mary's already said it. It is a controversial thing, and a lot of the tenants I spoke to, the only one that didn't get back to me was the Villages, and Larry Phillips' pilot, Sky Bolt. A lot of the tenants that are here tonight, they are opposed to shutting down the runway because it would greatly impact our businesses.
What about the possibility of commercial where you've got the T hangers? Because that's pretty valuable space there on 441 in the immediate term.
They've got one of those in the master plan. There is, I'll pull that out as
Yeah.
my best option. It's figure 6. I don't know if you've
And
got
I
that
think
here.
if you
but-
look at alternative 3, if we can flip to alternative 3. That one, no, I guess we didn't.
No, you
Okay.
didn't put it in there. You can show them that.
We've shown, in the master plan, there is an area, we do show in this area here, putting strictly commercial in this area. And I did that because I know that the city is considering just doing commercial and conventional hangars. I
Because
think
that's not
you're-
any of these ones you gave us.
No,
No.
it's not. It would be in the larger packets you've been getting. But I think you're going to get some pushback from the FAA and FDOT because part of what we are looking at in the facility requirements indicates that you're going to need an additional 22 T hangars at the airport within the next 20 years.
Well,
And just
this-
to ignore that.
Well, this has got, the one that you've got here has got like 27
Right.
T hangers.
So it's
And the
going-
commercial property.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do is just
Yeah.
show the full extent that you can use that piece of property. But I don't think that to just ignore T hangars on this airport or any airport is going to go over well, either with your tenants or potential tenants or FAA or FDOT, because they know there's a demand for that. And one of the things that we're trying to do in this master plan is to meet the demand that we know is there, and that's what the facility requirements are doing. Yes, sir. I shouldn't say that, but
Is there a somewhere in between option that might maybe shortening 321 enough that you could develop across on the north side of 441, but would still give you somewhat of a crosswind runway, not unlike what Ocala has?
you could probably shorten it a little bit, but you would definitely not be able to land the Falcon on it, which is, I know they use that quite a bit.
Well, we're probably one of the heaviest users of it because the point you made about, there's a lot of helicopters at this airport per capita.
Mhm.
It's a big part of us being here because when we do our training, the tower puts us south of 1331 so that our operations don't interfere with regular traffic. My concern when I see this kind of set up, and I get it, because from a business standpoint, I get this right away. This makes the most economic sense for the city and the airport. But when I look at that, it's like, okay, I'm not sure how my operation can be, there would need to be a compromise somewhere in there where we could still operate, because as it is, straight up, no changes to where we're based and no changes to the south end, it leaves nowhere on the airport property-wise for us to train and operate our firefighting business. So, it's one of those, I'm kind of torn on this, because as a pilot, I don't want 321 to go anywhere because I use it all the time.
Right.
They're, I would say probably for me, every third landing at the airport on a fixed wing, I'm landing on 321. And when I'm operating on a helicopter, almost exclusively on 321, since 1331 is the primary runway. And I can see maybe making a compromise, but I wonder, looking at that, if you shortened it to a true crosswind runway, yes, you would include the jets, but the jets also have a much higher crosswind limit than normal
Right.
planes do.
They would be obligated to use the primary.
And I just wonder, from a property usage standpoint and the FDOT rules and FAA rules and all that, how much room do you need to be able to reclaim that property north of 441? And could 321 even be extended any to the southwest?
You would, okay. I believe that the runway safety, the RPZ ends right here in this area. And you'd have to move that entire thing down to here, which basically means that you would then have to move from almost to here and that would just be the length of your runway.
I mean, if you were just spitballing, Brian, you'd say what, a minimum 2,500 feet or something for a single engine airplane? Yeah, and you'd really want 3 ideally for comfort.
And actually, the FAA, if they're going to be, if they don't participate in this runway because it is the crosswind runway that's not required, they would not participate in it. I'm not going to speak for the FDOT because they're sitting in the room, but we'd have to look at it, and I don't have the answers for you tonight on that one. Typically, though, at sea level, for an A1 aircraft, which is your smallest trainer aircraft, and I'm talking fixed wing, I'm not talking helicopter, you'd need probably about 3,000, a little over 3,000 feet in length if you're going to go by the FAA standards. We're a little higher here than on sea level, so it'd probably be a little bit longer.
So it's close. I mean, your options, I think it's close, because you're at 49.57 now. So
When you look at
losing
Umatilla, which is
2,000
not too
feet,
far off.
it's close.
You look at
Umatilla,
Umatilla,
it's 2,500 feet, and they've extended it, and it's usable by small airplanes, and it's pretty close alignment to this direction. It's, what, 20 degrees off? Something like that. And then the question I would have is, would there be any possibility of going off, you know, the approach end of runway 3, you know, could you pick up 500 feet or something going down that way, which is not in St. John's easement there. And, you know, yes, some of it looks like it's wetlands, but it's not all wetlands. And I know there's just nothing but muck and mud down there.
Right. We can look at it.
Maybe there's a middle
It's a
ground.
possibility. It's a possibility. I don't have the answers today. I haven't looked at it.
So is there action we need to do tonight, or just?
No, tonight's a workshop, so you
workshop?
can't take action anyway. I guess I'm assuming from here, we'll get some more input, have a couple more meetings. Ultimately, we need to put the plan together.
Is there any more comment from any people that are?
You might be able to back me up. This is hearsay almost to a point, but in a couple of conversations I had with Charlie Willer through the years, the original runway that was built by the Army Corps was rated for like up to 100,000 pounds, wasn't it?
I have no
It
idea.
was a fairly substantial, and when we did the extensions, the problem I understand is the extensions on 1331 were built to a lot lower weight level than the base 5,000-foot runway on 1331. And then they said the problem with that was it wasn't really the runway, it was the taxiways were never built to sustain that kind of weight.
I'd have to have an engineer go in and look at that. You might even
Back
need to
in
do
the
core
day, they used to
samples.
bring DC-9s and 737s in here on test flights, and they would land it on 1331 and do
Well, and they
Mexico's.
can land today. It's just that you can't do it on a sustained basis, or they will basically tear out the runway.
Well, and what I heard back then was they were okay as long as they didn't leave the runway. Like if they wrapped the runway into the taxiways, they were going to sink in the
Yeah,
asphalt.
I have not seen any engineering reports that would verify that, and that's what we would need before we could do that, before I could say that categorically. I do know that the records that I've seen just say that this runway is, the strength of the pavement is 12,500. They haven't said anything about bits and pieces.
Seems like it.
We just had the PCM report done, which is separate from the DOT pavement condition, which is more surface. The PCN does core samples. I forget the intervals, but they went down both runways and took samples through the entire length. And then they give it a rating, and the rating was a 14, and I forget what you call it, 14 whatevers. But it was, they said that with repetition, the largest aircraft that could land repetitively multiple, and I think they used 800 operations, was a Citation 10. I don't have the knowledge to compare that to a larger aircraft, but that was the data that they used.
Okay, I'd like to see
And
that.
nothing larger would be comfortable over a lengthy period of time.
Yeah.
I would just like to say, I'd hate to see the airport lose the runway in any way, shape, or form. Just, and Tracy can back me up on this, we had a small airplane come in, blow his tires, and refuse service. And he was stuck out on runway 1331, would not let me touch it. And so that runway was closed, and it was no big deal. We just used the other runway. The tower diverted the track to the other runway. Without that happening, we would have the airport closed the whole time.
Yeah.
Villages couldn't land. I mean, the airport was closed if we didn't have the other runway. So I value that runway big time. I don't think you guys even understand the value of how significant the backup runway is. And I hate to see it disappear.
37,000 pounds.
Any other comments? Questions?
No, I think you did a good job.
Thank you for your time.
There's a lot
Appreciate it.
of, lot of things we have to look into.
Yeah, I threw a lot at you
Particularly the
tonight.
weight of the asphalt, yeah.
I threw a lot at you tonight. But all that's in the reports that I've been giving you, I just tried to condense it down tonight, so
Good, thank you.
if you do want to read up on it further, be my guest. Thank you.